I am glad to introduce you to Tessa Canela. Professor Canela she's full professor at La Sapienza University. She in the area of history of Christianity. She has published a very important book about the Christian Empire and the sacred places, L'Impero Cristiano e i luoghi sacri. And she has written several studies on Constantine, on Helen, and her relationship with Arius and her memory. Some of her works deal with the construction of memory, which is a very important topic in this area. And so thank you very much. Tessa will use a PowerPoint, and I hope it will work. And then thank you for accepting our invitation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, so my paper will be about the epistle, the letter by Constantine to Alexander and Arius. This letter is a document of fundamental importance for understanding the political religious landscape in the Constantinian age and in the crucial period leading up to the convocation of the Council of Nicaea. And as such, it has been the object of the attention of many scholars who have discussed some fundamental aspects of it. Here, and in such a short time available, what I would like to do is to go over some of the fundamental problems that the letter poses and to propose a possible key to its interpretation, starting with its addresses, which Eusebius, the only one to have transmitted the text, not considering a later partial take by the Byzantine historian Socrates, identifies precisely with the Bishop of Alexandria and his presbyter. The letter takes place in the aftermath of the defeat of Licinius in 324 and is part of a series of missives and actions that Constantine undertook to secure control of the East. Immediately before this one, Eusebius cites another famous letter, the one to the provincials of the East, in which the emperor exhorted the newly subjugated provinces to conform to the Christian cult spontaneously without the use of force, which he considered useless and counterproductive at that stage. At the beginning of the letter, in fact, he refers to the military management that he had undertaken to resolve the Donatist schism in Africa, after having sent, in attempt to settle the dispute, some of you, if you can go to the next slide, Samuel, we can read the passage in which Constantine says that he have sent some of you, this is the first passage, but send some of you, eniusimon. Meaning by you, this you, not the generic community of ecclesiastic, but especially those of the East. No, it's the previous slide. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the first. Okay, we are in the first slide. I did not find another cure, I'm quoting, sufficient for the matter, but sent some of you to assist in restoring mutual concord among the litigants. In this, I diverge from the opinion expressed by some recently, who instead lean towards an identification with certain ecclesiastics, including Ostius of Cordova, who had in fact been Constantine's point of reference at least until the Council of Nicaea. The identification instead of these use with the Eastern bishops is evident from the next paragraph, in which Constantine explains the fact that he turned to the East because it was from the bosom of the East. We can read the second passage It was from the bosom of the East, the second line of the second passage. That the power of light and the law of the sacred religion have emerged. It was therefore understandable that the emperor turned to the east to seek the salvation of the people. Okay, I highlight ton et non soterias because we will turn again on this passage. What a deadly wound, the emperor continues. We can read, it's the third text that here is quoted. What a deadly wound as for him to learn that the dissension that arose among you was much more serious than that which still subsisted there, that is in Africa, so that now your own regions, precisely those from which I hope that healing would originate for the others, require a greater cure. Okay. Paul Parvis, echoed in Matthias Simpler's forthcoming doctoral thesis, has instead sought to identify these use from the East with the bishops who probably met in the winter of 324 in Antioch, when Eusebius of Caesarea himself would have been condemned for his closeness to the position of Arius. Parvis' proposal is therefore that Eusebius, not wishing to mention the Synod of Antioch in which he had been defeated, addresses the letter to Alexander and Arius as the main exponent of the dispute, and that Constantine's subsequent allocution and reproaches to the two are part of the emperor's typical rhetorical strategy of addressing representative and imaginary interlocutors by name. Parvis himself is then forced to admit that the same letter would later be addressed to the two protagonists of the dispute. The argument seems unconvincing to me and, above all, unnecessary with respect to the economy of the letter, which could indeed have been addressed to the two, considered part to Alexander and Arius, considered as a part of the Eastern Church. Moreover, Emanuela Principalli has convincingly demonstrated that the letter appears to be hardly congruent with the doctrinal climate of the Synod of Antioch, belonging to a moment subsequent and just before Nicaea, when the dispute by then appeared no longer solvable. But let us come to the content of the letter. It is evident that it reflects a phase of the dispute in which the emperor still hoped to exert his influence to settle the controversy, even minimizing the theological scope of the debate. On this point, it is to Principalli's merit, in line of Pietras, to have emphasized the rhetorical approach of his denigration of the object of the dispute, defined as only a particular matter of vain interest or a childish trifle. Both Principalli and Pietras contest the previously prevailing opinion among scholars, namely that the letter show how much Constantine was still alien to Christian theology, and argue that, on the contrary, the emperor was well informed by his ecclesiastical advisors. According to Pietras, this observation leads one to devalue the importance of the theological dispute for Constantine, to the point of considering the Council of Nicaea as having been conceived by the emperor before the dispute arose, and therefore originally unconnected to it and more dedicated to Easter, because not only Eusebius' partial restitutions, but also Constantine's letter following the council. Otherwise, Principalli emphasize the rhetorical character of the devaluation of the reasons for the disputes.
What's up?
Sorry? Okay. Can I go on? Okay.
Yeah.
An expedient used to convince the disputants to desist and seek conciliation. So what would I like to propose is a closer examination of the reference to the philosophical schools present in the letter, as not a banalization of the terms of the dispute, but as a precise reference to a widespread ideal in the light of what we can know about Constantine's theological philosophical background. Of course, the rhetorical or non-rhetorical consideration of such arguments also depends on the assessment of the letter as an authentic Constantinian product, its theological background, and its place in the corpus of letters attributed to him before or after Nicaea. On this topic, interpretations have also recently been proposed in support of the authentically Constantinian character of the epistles attributed to Constantine, regardless of the possible drafting in consultation with the imperial chancellery and with the reference or reference with the ecclesiastical hierarchy. On the basis of repetition of the same stylistic traits, of the same tone, of the same topics throughout the various letters and documents attributed to Constantine. This forces one to admit with Pierre Maraval first and now corroborated more recently by Javier Morales, stating that la touche de Constantin est incontestable en plusieurs passages. This is a quotation by Maraval. So recently, Alberto Camplani, here present, has also addressed one particular aspect of the letter, namely the accusation that Constantine first made against Alexander and then Arius of having publicly discussed matters concerning the most refined theological disquisitions, thus giving a public dimension to a dispute that should have remained within the circle of presbyters and didascaloi of the Alexandrian Church and not in front of a general assembly. According to Camplani, these accusations find correspondence in the letter of Arius and Alexander and thus reflect one of the fundamental aspects that gave rise to the controversy, which Constantine stigmatizes as a major error, mistake. My intervention is situated in the footsteps of the already numerous studies dedicated to the letter in order to highlight an aspect that is perhaps still waiting to be highlighted, valorized, starting with Constantine reference to the different positions of philosophical currents as an example of maintaining unity despite disagreement on specific aspects, which, as mentioned, has often been considered as an indication Constantine lacks of competence about the specific of Christian theology, or a rhetorical device. The passage is that quoted here. We can go ahead. Okay, we can read, for if I may remind your intelligence by a little example, pay attention to the philosophers themselves, how they all adhere to one doctrine, but often, when they disagree in any part of their formulations, even if they differ on the definition of a science, yet they achieve agreement because of the unity of the doctrine. I believe this point deserve deeper reflection. The passage is very clear, and service Constantine is useful to Constantine to reaffirm a twofold assumption expressed a little earlier, On the one hand, the danger of engaging in the understanding and interpretation of such difficult dogmas that can easily lead to dangerous mistakes, and on the other hand, the impropriety of disseminating in front of demos of such reflections to a large audience, to the people. We can read the second passage quoted here. For how many people are able to understand with exactitude or to interpret worthily the magnitude of such great and excessively difficult matters? In this regard, the thought of Origen concerning the doctrine of the simples and also his distinction between truths firmly established by apostolical tradition and uncertain points has been rightly recalled by scholars. But I believe that the weight of the arguments spread also in contemporary philosophical circles and of the accusation made against Christians regarding their internal divisions should be reconsidered in the light of Constantine philosophical as well as Christian education training. This aspect, and therefore the urgent need to pacify a divided Christian landscape, may also help to explain the letter's conclusion, in which Constantine expresses in a very emotional charged tone his disapproval of the dispute and the importance of restoring peace. It is commonly thought that Constantine was a poorly educated soldier with little to no familiarity with literature or Greek philosophy. However, this assumption is questionable. It is possible that Constantine studied philosophy during his youth, especially since he spent several years at Diocletian's court, where philosophers were welcome. Constantine lived in Nicomedia, while Lactantius was teaching rhetoric there, and later he selected Lactantius himself as his son's tutor in Trier. Several sections of the speech to the Assembly of the Saints, which is now generally considered authentic, not only resemble Lactantius' divine institutes in both ideas and language, but also suggested direct intellectual influence. Even more significant is the philosophical content of the speech, with its first section dedicated especially to the philosophical foundation of Christianity. This part closely mirrors Chalcidius, the Neoplatonic philosopher of the 4th century that produced a commentary on Plato's Timaeus, which was dedicated to a certain Osius that is presumably identifiable to the same Osius, bishop of Cordoba, who was close to Constantine. Even though it is uncertain whether the emperor lacked formal training in Greek philosophy, he could have read Chalcidius' Latin translation of the first part of Timaeus, I said, with the Italian way, and its commentary. Osius, who knew Greek well, may have introduced Constantine, who certainly spoke Greek, to the works of Platonic philosophers of the 2nd century. Both the speech and Chalcidius appear to derive ideas from these philosophers. The first section of the speech seems to demonstrate knowledge of Numenius of Apamea, a Neo-Pythagorean philosopher from the second half of the 2nd century. Numenius posed the existence of the first God and the second God, an idea seemingly reflected in paragraph 9 of the speech to the Assembly of Saints, where Constantine praises Plato for distinguishing between the first God, who is beyond the material world, and the second God, who is subordinate to the first. Constantine's Christian education went hand in hand, therefore, with a basic philosophical preparation that made him perfectly capable of understanding the terms of the issues discussed in the doctrinal sphere, but also prudent with respect to the public dimension, extension of the forced, and about the forced attempt to reach consensus on certain controversial points of faith. From the same Medio-Platonic and Neoplatonic milieu that Constantine showed to know, came those exaltation of the beauty and harmony of different points of view, albeit in the unity of the truth, that, and we can go to the next slide, thank you. Okay, yes, that Clement of Alexandria in the Stromates already adopted to recover the aspiration to the truth of the Greek philosophical schools, only inspired by the Logos. We can read, in fact, innumerable ideas professed by the various sects. We can see that they agree with the one that generated them, with the truth as a whole, even if they seem dissimilar to each other. And in the same line, one must remember those arguments in favor of the legitimacy of the different paths to truth and the unapproachability of the divine mystery to which Themistius, for example, and then the senator Symmachus would refer in the late 4th century to ask political power for religious freedom. Themistius we can read, but quickly. I would be tempted to say that perhaps it is God himself who does not like there to be the total harmony among men. Nature loves to hide itself, says Heraclitus, and before it loves to hide its maker, who is revered and adored by us precisely because the possibility of knowing him is not within everyone's reach. But we can go ahead. Symmachus, the argumentation of Symmachus are quite similar. The importance of the unity in the different position, in the different point of view. Such arguments crossed philosophical and Christian intellectual thought, and can probably constitute Constantine's interpretative horizon, at least in an early phase, with respect to Christian doctrinal divisions. The attempt to propose a common basic truth to which to conform the different points of view appears somewhat anachronistic, certainly ineffective in that specific context, but it does not indicate on Constantine's side a lack of awareness of the issue's terms. And on the other hand, it appears more relevant than a mere rhetorical device, because it constitutes a still widespread mental horizon to which many exhortations to tolerance which refer. Moreover, and I go to the conclusion, moreover, they seems to be grounded, Constantine's arguments seem to be grounded in the ancient conception that each ethnos corresponds to a god and therefore to a religious choice, all legitimate, which occurs in so much Christian apologetics and in pagan polemics. These aspects, which place the doctrinal problem within a political rhetoric of bringing together the different opinions of the ethnoi about the divinity should clearly not to be underestimated. In the beginning of the letter, Constantine openly declares that, and we can go ahead, it's the last slide. Okay. It's the second passage quoted. In the first place, so it's the first goal of the letter, I set out to bring together in one consistent view the opinions held by all peoples concerning the divinity. Ten apanton ton et non peritoteion protesin. So Constantine framed his intervention within the traditional rhetoric of different religions options related to the varieties of ethnoi, a term that recurs a little further on in the passage quoted at the beginning of the letter, in which the emperor explained his intervention in the controversy by the disappointment derived from the fact that he had hoped that the bishop of the East would bring salvation to the peoples, ton et non soterias. It was the first passage that we read. The closure of the letter, of the epistle, confirms his concern, stating that he did not go further east than Nicomedia, precisely because of the disputes that had arisen, and asking the divided bishop to open the way to the east for him. And it's the last passage. By your mutual concord, we can read, open to me henceforth the way to the east, which you obstructed by your mutual quarrels, and grant me as soon as possible the joy of seeing you as well as all other peoples. As it's well known, Constantine later chose to send his mother Helena to ratify his rule of the eastern provinces through another form of control, that of her exemplary devotional model. Thank you. That is finished.
Thank you very much, Tessa. And now we have time for some remarks, questions, commentaries, etc. And then please feel free to raise your hand. Well, Alberto.
Yes, thank you, Tessa. One of my problems is to understand the advisors of Constantine. Who were the advisors? It is interesting when one reads, for example, the letter of Eusebius of Caesarea about the homoousios that says that it was Constantine in some way to impose the use of this term. I don't believe here to Eusebius. At least I think that there were people ready to give him some sort of help from this point of view. I wonder if also from the philosophical point of view there were people beyond Lactantius ready to help him, and how much these can have influenced his way of writing.
Thank you, Alberto, for this question. The advisor, So I think that Eusebius insert this letter in a lot of other letters that Constantine published after the defeat of Licinius in 324. So the advisors are in all these cases, in all these letters, the new provinces, the new peoples that are coming under his rule. So I think that under the direct advisor that are clearly here, the bishops of the East in general, and Alexander and Arius in the specific case, I think that the principal goal for Constantine is to address the bishops of the East, to try to not underestimate, but content the dispute and the importance and the growing arguments of the dispute, to control. I mean, my intent, that perhaps it is a bit different for this audience now today, is that to highlight the political dimension of the letter. So that I think that it's important to not underestimate this aspect, because of the recent defeat of Licinius and the intention and the importance for Constantine to use the religion quarrels and the religion devotion as Helena, as the missing of Helena in the eastern provinces, to control these territories. For him, and in his mental background is perhaps more mixed than we can imagine, between philosophical argumentation about the different point of view, and most of all, the principal goal of Constantine to seek peace. He defines himself as a minister of the peace at the start of the letter. So the political dimension and the importance to restore peace make him capable to restore and go on beyond this philosophical argumentation to try to control these quarrels in the provinces just went under his rule.
Okay, thank you. David Hunter, please.
Yes, thank you very much for excellent talk. My recollection of the letter of Constantine to Arius and Alexander is that he also says that he thinks the topics that they're arguing about are trivial. I don't have the text right in front of me, but he says something to that effect, which would be something different from what you have in the passages that you highlighted, where he's acknowledging a legitimate variety of philosophical opinions. To say that the points that they were arguing about were trivial seems to suggest that he doesn't have a deep understanding of the doctrinal issues. So how do you put those two together?
Yeah. This is a problem, but some scholars have supposed about this trivial definition of the issues discussed by Arius and Alexander. From this, they assume that Constantine effectively had not a deep knowledge of the problems, of the issues, of the doctrinal issues of the dispute. But I I don't agree, because I think that those were rhetorical devices. Those definitions by Constantine were a way to present something that he wants to underestimate, and we find in other letters some rhetorical device to try to control the quarrels. But I think that under this rhetorical device, the real thought of Constantine is that the recall of philosophical dimension, a philosophical dimension that give him a sort of background to read this quarrel in another light, to try to control this quarrel through this light, through a philosophical dimension that was not only philosophical, because as I have read, Clemens of Alexandria also use this philosophical way to see the divisions in the Christians about in Christians, but also in philosophical currents, to explain the different position, but they all are different paths to the unity, to the same truth. So it was an argumentation that was philosophical, but it was already held by Christian intellectual and Christian fathers to explain these quarrels. It is a problem concerning also how Christian division were accused by pagans literature. We are already in a phase in which the philosophical currents and pagans argumentation are still strong. So Constantine has to face the Christian quarrels, but also has to face the pagans' accusation to the Christian to be too divided in a lot of different currents. I don't know if it's enough.
Sorry. Please, Uta, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for your presentation. I agree very much with your estimation of Constantine, and that it's not simply rhetoric, and it's not a letter which can simply be explained on the way that he's only, so to say, 20% informed, and he is not informed about the rest or so. So I think if one adds a further aspect, it would help to understand the letter from my point of view, and which would support your explanation and estimation of the letter. Well, you quoted the passage right from the beginning of the letter that he wanted to send some of the Easterns to the West to settle the Donatist dispute there, and then he describes it's like an experience that he's astonished and was angry about the dispute in the East. So, but if you compare these two different quarrels, so this was in the West with the Donatists, it was a quarrel which had a schism right from the beginning. So about baptismal rite and ecclesiastical bishop ordination. So this was a schism right from the beginning, and so this was a different kind of debate which had ecclesiastical divisions to have two churches right from the beginning. And because the debate was about ecclesiastical ritual, which had immediate this effect of the schism. If you don't accept the election of this bishop, then you have a second church. And so I think Constantine then fears the danger, or is angry about the danger about this, not only because it's a more philosophical question, but that there should be room in the Christianity, so to say, to have have the possibility to debate about this, because this is a question which does not have an imminent effect on ecclesiastical unity or not, because it's not related to church mass, baptism, election, ordination, and all this. And so he's angry about that, this more philosophical, theological dispute had, in a second way, this church divisional effect. And this is probably the problem he is mostly dealing with. But this supports your estimation about Peter, I think.
Yeah, I really agree with you. Thank you, Uta, for this adjunction, this remark, because yeah, it's true that only in this only in the phase in which he faced with the Arian dispute, he is facing up with the doctrinal issues. And first, he recalled the problem solved that was never solved, really. That was the Donatist schism, that was an ecclesiastical schism. So to that, now he can recall the question related to the dispute about doctrine, about ideas and thought and doctrinal issues. But first, it was another issue that, in his point of view, perhaps it could seem at first real serious, but the next was, and he seems very angry about it, that the next is even serious, even more serious than the first. So thank you for your suggestion.
Thank you. And Luis, please.
Yeah, a very quick point. I think that one parallel for your argument is Origen in Contra Celsum Book 5, where Celsus has said, you Christians are always disagreeing with each other.
Yeah.
And he says, yes, and that shows that we are intellectually serious. He doesn't take it to be a sign that this shows that the Christian church is broken into factions. Rather, it is a sign of intellectual seriousness. So I wondered if that's another parallel to the point that David Hunter was raising about Constantine saying, you are arguing about nothing. What he's saying is, yes, of course you're arguing, that's what I expect, but stop making so much of this, because this is what you should be doing. So he's angry, but there is this philosophical precedent that already Origen has adopted for saying, of course we argue, because we're clever. So it shouldn't divide the body.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I haven't time to quote Celsus and the Origen answer to Celsus, but it was very clear and very an example, very right for this issue, because of the Celsus accused the Christian to be too much divided, and the Origen answer is Origen give a lot of different answers, but the most argumentative one was that the capability, the way to discuss of the Christian doctrine is a way to refine, to give more to give the way that the argumentation became more refined, more specific. So it's a way of training for Christians, the doctrinal debate. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. You Alberto, you wanted to...
Just a very, very short remark about the letter. If I understood very well the letter, there is also an allusion to the Meletian schism in Egypt, because to say something about Arius, but also another schism that is active. And this is very interesting from my point of view.
I didn't find this reference to the Meletian schism. So, Alberto, do you hear me and do you see me? Because I see you freeze. I don't know if I'm the only one to see Alberto freeze. Do you see me?
He's frozen. I think
it's frozen. Yeah.
No, yeah. Oops.
Okay. So the reference to the Meletian schism is not present by me. I didn't find it. There is the reference about Donatism, but I didn't find a precise reference to the Meletian schism. If you have knowledge of this, please give me the reference.
I will read again Samuel's translations or
the letter, in this letter.
Probably another letter, but I will search in a moment.
Just to say, there is a very brief passing reference to disturbances in Egypt, which looks like the Meletian schism. It's in Eusebius's own narrative.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the life near the letter.
Okay.
Yeah. Perhaps yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I would say something, a remark. I think that it is very interesting to see these different levels of Christian discourse in the letter, in the sense that this distinction between scholastic discourse that gives room for different opinions and the public discourse in the church that must be like united. And to remember that in the 3rd century in Alexandria, we have two poles, that is the school and the bishop. But in the 4th century, we have only one. And then in some way, the bishop took on the features of the theologian, so to say. And then this distinction between the voice of the bishop and the voice of the theologian, I think is very, very insightful, because Arius also complains several times because Alexander publicly say this and that. If he said this and that, that is in a scholastic milieu, it is not a problem, but publicly in the church. No?
Yeah, it's a very good remark. Thank you, Samuel, because it's important to keep in mind this distinction and evolution of the context of Alexandrian in particular, about the scholastic milieu and the church, the church milieu in a general sense. Thank you. This is very useful.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Tessa. And now we are going to have 5 minutes break. You can